Sorry about that tech difficulties. I muted myself, so I'll restart over. But thank you and welcome back to your next session for Sports Pro Live. We'll be taking a dive into the world of sponsorship. Like everyone else over the last few months, I imagine there's been lots of disruption, and specifically for those of you in sports sponsorship, I'm sure you've had these great activation plans with your sponsorships that you've taken those plans and you've put them in a bowl and you've gone and thrown them away. How you're going about figuring those out on the fly, I'm not quite too sure, but thankfully we've got a great panel of experts who hopefully can give you some insights into how they're going about things, changing up their plans and sponsorship, and how to make the most out of this new world that we have when it comes to sports and sponsorship. Please do remember we want this to be an active and engaged session, so please make sure you include your questions as our moderator will be going through those and putting those out to our panelists throughout the day. From there, very happy to hand things over to your moderator, James Pearce.
Hello, Chris, and hello, everybody else. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Good afternoon to you all. And we do have a really stellar panel this afternoon, and a really interesting and incredibly relevant topic as well, finding value in uncertain times. I'm sure that is a topic on the minds of many people who are tuning in to this today. Let me start by introducing the panel. I'm going to get them to do a bit of work themselves right from the off and get them actually to introduce themselves. But Kate, should we start with you as you're in the top box?
Sure. Thanks, James, and thanks, Chris. Kate Pratt with Liverpool Football Club. Thrilled to be here. So a big thank you to SportsPro. And I head up global partnerships for the Americas, focused on global rights deals with corporations headquartered in North and South America.
Thank you, Kate. Tom, over to you.
My name is Tom Whiteside. I am UK sponsorship lead for Toyota GB, mainly focusing on our Olympic and Paralympic partnerships, both at a global level and here in the UK.
Thank you, Tom. Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jackie Wilcox. I head up marketing for Visa in Southern Europe, which is Spain, Italy and Portugal. We obviously have a lot of sponsorship partnerships with people like the Olympics, Paralympics and FIFA and UEFA, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you, Jackie. And Amir?
Hey, Amir Zonozi, co-founder, president of Zoomph, also a board member at Women in Sports Tech. We focus on helping understand how sponsorships become most effective on the team and on the brand side.
Great, thank you very much. Jackie, I'm going to start with you because I mean, everyone around this panel here has been disrupted. We've all been disrupted during the pandemic. But in terms of big global sponsorships, of course, we've lost the Olympics, and that's a very big deal for Visa. Do you want to just kick us off by talking a little bit about how that's impacted you, maybe how you've worked to try to manage that disruption during the past few months?
Yeah, I mean, we've had impacts which are going to be longer playing as well, because we've had the impact of the Olympics and Paralympics being postponed. We've also had our sponsorship with women's football be impacted because the European Championships, which was due to take place next year, is now being pushed to the year after. But the immediate reaction though was with the Olympics that we need to continue to support our Team Visa athletes. Our athletes have been working very hard. The pinnacle of their career is going to the Olympics, and then all of a sudden, like everybody else in the world, rather than going to training every day, they're suddenly at home. If they can't train at home, they need to keep fit in different ways. And it was very important for us as an organisation to ensure that they still had our support, and we could still do everything that we could to give them the visibility they deserved.
How difficult or challenging is it to unpick something like the Olympics and Paralympics just with a few months' notice?
I think we've all learned new skill sets, during this time. We obviously had made a lot of investment within Japan for things like acceptance, so that people, when they went there, could pay with their Visa card when they travel to Japan. Those plans continue, and we'll make sure that next year it's bigger and better. I think, and this is something that I'm sure that Tom will reflect on as well. When you're a technology company, you need to think about what you are really showcasing at the event as well from a product point of view. So we just need to make sure that we've got relevant stories next year too.
Well, let's bring in Tom, because the Paralympics is part of your beat, isn't it, Tom?
Sure. Yeah. We're a top partner across the Olympics with the IOC and the Paralympics with the IPC. And obviously, like Jackie, it's a huge shift for us having the games postponed into next year for us. Tokyo is a real landmark moment for us as a business as we move from being a pure automotive manufacturer into a provider of mobility services and products as well. It's a real opportunity for us to show that technology in a real world environment, and that doesn't change for us as of next year. But at a local level for us, what we've done very quickly is shift to give ourselves more of a community focus this year. We've invested heavily over the last few years in community projects in the UK, not least our disability sports platform, Parasport. And what's the investment over the last few years has meant that we feel that we're not as tied to the boom bust cycles that can sometimes come with an Olympic and Paralympic Games over the 4 years.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that then, and how you've been working with some of the athletes during lockdown?
Sure. So Parasport is what we feel is a best-in-class digital solution to help more disabled people in the UK get active. This isn't a pathway to elite sport. This is very much about making it easier to get people active. So we've done that by looking at what the barriers are to getting active for disabled people and trying to address those one by one. At the heart of this site is a database of accessible opportunities. There's about 3,500 opportunities on there at the moment, all filterable by your impairment, by your age, by your location, day part, sex, all of those sorts of things, really, so that people can find an accessible opportunity as easy as possible. But what we're trying to do is wider than that, build a community of like-minded people, whether those are participants, whether they're coaches, whether they're parents, carers. People can go on and find the information that they need. Off the back of that, we've launched a small grants fund. So through partnerships with people like Sport England, for those of you that are based in the UK, but a government body has helped us launch a small grants fund so that we can invest physically back into the community to buy equipment for sports clubs and activity providers. We've worked pretty closely with our athletes over this time as well. I think, kind of as Jackie touched on, we are committed to continue to support them. We're just pivoting how we use them and how we interact with them, focusing more on community.
Thank you. And Kate, when lockdown started, you were working for a club that was seemingly just days away from its biggest moment for many years, winning the Premier League title, and everything ground to a complete halt. I mean, again, in terms of disruption, it couldn't have been more disruptive than that. Just talk us through how that had to change, I'm sure, some of your carefully laid plans in the Americas.
Oh, well, James, we don't want to moan, but we felt like we got it bad. I mean, embarking on arguably the most exciting 15-month run in the club's history and just games away from winning the Premier League trophy, it certainly shook everyone globally by surprise, but took a lot of thinking through how we could drive value and delight our global partnerships within the group that I work in. And certainly thinking quite a bit about how we create certainty for partners in what is such an uncertain time. And what I mean by that is focusing on the things that we could control throughout the pandemic. So leveraging our digital estate, which is really, really strong right now. We've got almost 100 million users across our social networks. Something that we're really proud of is we, in 2019, 2020, were the most engaged football club on the planet and had more combined engagements across our channels than the top 8 US teams combined. So certainly as you look at COVID and people sitting at home, we thought a lot about how do you celebrate a win in a digital world and just adjust the new normal. And then with that, thinking about things like purpose-led marketing, you're seeing more of that from brands. And we think that really, really matters right now as we make our way through COVID and hopefully come out of it. And then lastly, just being cognizant of the shifting marketplace that the global pandemic has brought upon us. So again, I think like everyone, no industry was exempt from COVID. We've had to be nimble and really adjust with what's come at us quickly.
And for you, I suppose tone was so important as well, getting the tone right during lockdown when the fans were so close to what they wanted, but there was obviously a realistic chance that actually the whole league might be scrapped and that you might be back to square one again. So trying to get that tone right and be responsible must have been quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely the tone right from certainly a club perspective, first and foremost, but the tone right with our global partners who were amazing to navigate through this with us. I was laughing when one of the questions was lessons learned. We certainly learned that it's really hard to tell millions of Liverpool fans to celebrate at home with social distance restrictions when you win a Premier League title. Not easy.
Thank you. And Amir, obviously you're coming at this from a slightly different angle. Tell us a little bit about how you've been impacted and also some of the clients you're working with, how you've managed to help them through these challenging months.
Yeah, no, this has all been trends that have been happening. They just catalyzed and happened a lot faster. I mean, the move to digital. I think sports teams. Look, I believe that sport is not the product; it's a platform. And sports teams, their competition is everything that stops thumbs from scrolling, from Fortnite to Netflix, and they're providing an engagement and entertainment. And so, how for them to best understand their audiences is paramount. Just like Kate was saying, connecting with them on digital, with Visa and Toyota, the amazing adaptability with the Olympics. Visa moving, focusing on e-commerce, focusing on home delivery, focusing on contactless payment, the heroic medal and the social campaign that Toyota did. Phenomenal, right? This, people need to move fast. People need to understand their audiences. And we've been, seeing this coming, looking at how to monetize social media, how to treat each platform differently, how to create content that resonates. All of that is inventory when done right. One of the best executions from Liverpool is I love what they've been doing with Intel and the TrueView. That Mo Salah goal back in early September was phenomenal. September 14th. We are in September. See, I don't even know what time it is. But basically what we're trying to do is help understand when are sports teams, when are they creating content? How are they engaging with them? Their record on the field or off the field to me is less important than how do they impact their audience and how do they best connect with them. I think, focusing as an event company is a mind state of yesterday. We still need to do it. Experiential is hugely important, but what this has really cemented is this focus on we need to go to the fans. We need to go to where they are, when they are, and think more like a D2C company. So that's what we've been focusing on. We just had an amazing article with LAFC posted on SportsPro yesterday. And so, and that goes into details. And LAFC, kudos to them and Ryan Bashar and team. They've been planning this way before, COVID, sort of the impact of this has happened. They saw this coming. And in organizations like Liverpool, I mean, the way, like from even subscribing to their TV or buying their products through their store, they know the value of this data. And so all we focus on is looking at those data and insights, understanding who those people are, and then connecting them so they can create better content and understand that value for partners like Visa and Toyota.
Obviously, no one could have predicted at the start of the year what was going to come, Amir. But I mean, how many years ahead have we moved, do you think, in the 6 months? I mean, do you think we've basically jumped 5 years? I mean, what kind of how seismic is the change we're seeing here?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't put that in time, right? But like looking at like the elements of what we're building up towards, and I'll double tap on Intel, who's not on this, but because of the Liverpool example, that content, right? It's 5K cameras that can then be repurposed for hologram, AR, VR, if you're wearing a VR headset. It's thinking about how do we create content that's going to resonate over time, right? How do we create content that we can best connect with? So I can't give you a time frame of how fast things are moving, but I can tell you that more and more, we got to be more focused on that audience that's not at the event, right? There's more people across the world that are watching this content now, obviously, but I think the most important thing too is what Visa and Toyota are doing with this purpose-led, purpose-based marketing, connecting with fans about what they care about, and then backing it up with these sizable donations to make sure that these grants push these events forward.
Thank you, and I'm sure, Jackie, for you, making the right content is so important.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, without stating the obvious, none of us have been through something like the pandemic before, where suddenly everybody's at home, nobody can go out, and how do you reach that audience? From our perspective, from a business perspective, we're using things like e-commerce, the safety elements towards that as well, and security, but also working with our team of athletes who are seen as being superhuman. They are the fastest, they are the strongest. But all of a sudden, they're in a situation which is exactly the same as everybody else on the planet. So we use them to do things like communicate simple messages around, make sure that you wash your hands. Later on, it was about, okay, how to keep fit when you're at home. And then now when recovery is starting again, we're using them for things like small business recovery. So getting our athletes on, in the US and also in Europe to talk about how you can support your small business. Maybe they're talking about their favorite local bakery, maybe they're talking about a favorite bookshop, but kind of really connecting with the audience in a way that has a better impact on society, but also it just gets you kind of a little bit closer to the end user and to the consumer.
In many ways, let's bring in Kate. We're seeing the power of the athlete really coming to the fore more than ever, aren't we, during the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where the Premier League setup with access to players is tremendously valuable right now. We've had many domestic brands that were investing over here in stateside opportunities look to us because of our access and ability to leverage players and content, which is really impactful right now. I think, James, to your point on tonality, there's a lot you can do with players and brands to be mindful of the world we're living in, and the strength behind their followings when coupled with Liverpool's global reach is about as good as it gets.
Tom, looking at the specific topic we're given here is how is it possible to establish and maintain an authentic partnership? And we're talking a bit about maintaining those partnerships. What about establishing them? I mean, realistically, are people looking at establishing new partnerships right now, or is it just a question for most companies, brands, etc., just to hang on to what they have?
Yeah, I've had a few conversations over the last week or so with people in that rights sales space, and it does feel like it is recovering, and it is recovering quickly. Those conversations are happening. I think the deals between brands and rights holders will look slightly different. I mean, we've talked about the kind of traditional rights package being dead for years now, but I think almost like the content side of things, this has accelerated things really quickly. And I think what we are going to see more of now is really flexible rights packages. I was speaking to a rights holder the other day that puts kind of a unit value against each right, so that if you do need to change those month by month, year by year of the contract, you're able to do it for something which you've agreed at the start is of like for like value. So whilst the contracting of new partnerships is pretty difficult at the moment, it's by no means impossible, and we've seen a few big deals going through, and I'd probably expect that to continue over the next few months.
Amir, if you could give us some advice to a particular brand now, what would that main advice be right now then?
Yeah, I mean the one and the one way to engage with fans right now is digital, right? So you're going to want to leverage that effectively. Don't look at the reach of LFC is amazing, right? But you also want to look at the quality of the audience, and an audience is not homogeneous, right? There's different groups, there's different segments. You want to understand your target audience and who you're trying to reach and connect with. So when it comes to measurement and understanding the value of your social content, there's a couple metrics that you can focus on. One is impressions with CPM, engagements with CPE, video views with CPV. But then there's all these factors of recall that go into discounting what that total value is towards the brand. So there's social brand value, and then leveraging that through social engagement, whatever digital campaigns that you're running. You're able to see those different audiences, and if you are actually reaching your quality of the audience that you want to reach. But again, it's for brands, they're looking at this as sports as one option, right? Esports is another option. Do I want to put it on Spotify for music and run ads on there? They have to diversify their strategy to get to where people are going and to be in front of them, to be useful. But you need to look at not just the content and what you want to put out, but what is that audience looking for from you? And that's, key elements that you see what Jackie's saying with Visa and what Tom is saying with Toyota is that they're listening to their audiences, they're being useful, they're creating programs to help facilitate what they need and want. And when you have this focus on specific groups and target audiences that you're trying to reach, you have to personalize as much as possible. We have an internal phrase at Zoomph here. We call it niches get riches, right? The more you focus on that specific audience and you personalize that experience for them, they're going to resonate with it. They're going to engage with it. They're going to share with it. Women's sports right now is at an all-time high with the amount of activity and engagement around that. I think that is the best. Alex Ohanian, tweeted something with Angel City, this is the best bet. Save the receipt, and so looking at these different options and engaging and interacting, but you have to diversify and work with multiple organizations to get in front of that target audience that you want to get to.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start bringing in a few questions, though. Please do add your questions through the app if you've got some questions. But let me. This is a question from Rodrigo, and I'm going to bring you in on this, Kate, which goes like a little bit to what I was just chatting to Tom about. But do you think sponsors will be more cautious with their approach to sponsoring a team, league, or event, given the uncertainty we have today? What can be the best selling point to attract sponsors under these circumstances?
Yeah, so relieved to hear that Tom thinks we're moving in the right direction there, certainly on the brand side. But the simple answer is yes, and it goes back to my point earlier about how do you provide certainty in what is such an uncertain time and so much unknown. So again, I think looking at digital and things that we can control and guarantee, really fortunate, and we've spent a lot of time internally just ideating around because of our ownership in Fenway Sports Group. There's certainly differences in baseball and the Premier League. And fortunate for us, so much of our media value is in that digital reach that we can provide to brands through elements like our LED and our social channels. So I think we've spent a lot of time thinking about finding the right marriage between partnerships and media, and a lot of what Amir just touched on in how do you get to understand audiences better? I just took a note on niches get riches. That's so great. But how do you really understand audiences in all pockets of the world so that you can provide value to brands? And certainly it's all intensified by COVID.
Thank you. And Jackie, do you want to pick up on that at all as well?
Yeah, I think it's not about kind of having sponsorship so you've got large scale events and hospitality and things. We go into sponsorships because we believe these partners have got something else to say. It allows us to have a different conversation. With the Olympics, it's unique. It has the power to inspire. There's no other sporting event like it. Our sponsorship of women's football is about being able to have a conversation around the gender gap and thinking about diversity and inclusion and just thinking about how we take equality and inclusion from the sports field through to the boardroom. So I think your sponsorship needs to be about just that little bit more than the event itself.
Tom, you were talking earlier about the work you're doing in disability sport in particular. As we are in these really difficult times, are companies like yourselves perhaps under more pressure? Is there more responsibility for you to be socially responsible with some of the work you're doing?
It's an interesting one. It's one that's always been at the forefront of what we do. We plan for something which, yes, works for our business and our brand, but also leaves a positive legacy and does some good with the marketing dollars that we spend. So it is always at the front of our minds. I think what the COVID pandemic has probably done has highlighted the challenges of the most vulnerable in our society, whether that's the aged, whether that's the disabled, whether that's the homeless. Those challenges existed already, but I think this has really shone a light on it. But also wider than that, I guess, showing the power of community. The projects that we do, yes, they become more important during COVID, but they were important before, and we hope that they'll be important as we come out the back of this, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Yeah, you need to be seen, or you want to be seen, presumably, as a company not just of selling cars, but actually is putting something back as well.
Yeah, we're one that's like a lot of companies. We are invested in the fabric of the communities in which we operate, and I think it's the right way to do business, to do good by those people who work for us and interact with our products and services.
I mean, you mentioned briefly esports a few minutes ago. I mean, what is this impact going to have on esports? Is this the best thing that could possibly have happened to esports, locking fans out of stadiums and locking down sport for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I think with esports, it gave them an opportunity to be that, have their time in the sun, right? And and it's just one form of engagement with a different audience segment that watches esports, right? And so whether it's League of Legends and Riot Games, or whether it's Call of Duty and Activision and Blizzard, like there's they're looking at ways of there's a different distinction. There's similarities and there's differences, right? But when people are hanging out in Fortnite and talking to each other, when people are playing Call of Duty with their headset and hanging out with friends and connecting, it's not just about gameplay. It's also about social connections. It's a digital watering hole. And for them to watch esports, they're watching, one, to learn how to better improve on when they play, very similarly to golf, but two, they are interacting with an audience that they can connect with and engage with. And so you look at like 100 Thieves, you look at Team Liquid, it's more than just their sport. It's a lifestyle. They're connecting with influencers within it. Same reason why Mark Zuckerberg had, a video yesterday with Marquez Brownlee. But the key thing is, and what you're seeing everyone in this panel saying is, and I'm going to paraphrase for everyone, but you have to adapt to the times and move forward. Everyone got knocked down by this, but those that get knocked down and get up and start running are the ones that are going to run what this future looks like. And so in that case, like the reason, like this is my favorite hat right now, and I'll put it on. Hopefully it's not backwards for everyone, but like we're adapting to the times, right? Like you guys all get this because of Zoom meetings and webinars just like this, but it's you have to adapt and move forward. And to do that, you have to go where those options are to engage and grow. It's not an option to retreat. And so, we got to take care of our community. We got to take care of our front line, and we got to take care of what is coming next. And that right now is digital. So whether it's esports, whether it's, women's soccer, whether it's, the Premier Lacrosse League, whether it's the English Premier League, right? Those are different ways of giving people and, amazingly what these athletes are doing by putting themselves in and they're putting a risk, right? But they're doing it for the love of what they do. And they're giving us a way to entertain and be engaged. But it's whatever option this is, these audiences are passionate about something, and we need to present it to them in the right way and understand what they want. It's not about us, it's about them, and how do we cater to them.
Thank you. Kate, I'm going to jump back a bit to what we were chatting about with Tom as well, and bring you in from the Liverpool perspective on the importance of sport doing the right things in terms of social good.
Yeah, absolutely. So Visa and Toyota are certainly leaders as it relates to purpose-driven marketing. And on the Liverpool front, we're fortunate that we've got a historic club that so many of the themes we're seeing from a brand perspective are just intrinsic to our DNA. So thinking about things like diversity and inclusion, about how we support small businesses, both within the local community of Liverpool, but our larger global communities, thinking through how we can provide value in areas like digital and really just be cognizant of what brands are looking for. I love how Amir said that adaptability is key right now. We're hearing it from some of our major partners like Standard Chartered Bank and AXA Insurance and Carlsberg, who already do such great purpose-driven marketing. But we've also been looking to emerging categories that we believe won't be just a flash in the pan, but will remain really healthy as we come out of COVID, and thinking through how those align with what we have from an initiative perspective at Liverpool.
Thank you. Jackie, I'm going to bring in a question here from Jonathan. And Jonathan says, how important is the social reach to brands looking for new sponsor platforms? Will brands be open to spending more for properties that have a greater CRM and known fan database?
I think as long as it's, go back to my point earlier, it needs to be bigger than just reach. It needs to be kind of reach and what's the story we can tell. Why is it important? They say, we've invested in women's football because we think it's growing, and we think it's also a very important story that we need to tell. The Olympics, as I say, is just kind of huge. We've also done sponsorships with esports, as you were saying, because it is growing. So it's about, I think reach is important, but it's also what story you can tell.
Okay, Tom, do you want to pick up on that at all?
Yeah, I think Amir's covered it as well. Its reach is wonderful, but if you don't know who they are and how you can engage with them, it becomes largely meaningless. As you can imagine, I get sent an awful lot of rights holder proposals, and they all have enormous numbers in it. But actually, unless I know how that mirrors against my target consumer and what their behaviors are, those numbers don't mean a huge amount to us. So it's a nice to have, but there needs to be more depth behind it.
And Amir, do you want to pick up on that as well?
Yeah, and I think it's super important to focus on diversity. One, I love this panel is 50-50 on gender ratio. That's well done by SportsPro. You don't see this a lot in sports panels, but also not just, this in itself, but bringing more people of diversity behind the tech that provides these results, the teams. We just need a better job of having more people that represent others so that we can better connect with fans. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to SportsPro for thinking ahead of this and making a panel that is diverse. But it's not just within sports and within like the different sports that we sponsor, but then the front office and then the organizations and tech that surround this to make this all happen. And so I just wanted to give a call out to that has to be paramount. And we're seeing that in 2020, there's been a lot of things that, people are looking at and saying like, this has been rough, this has been bad. But you can also look at this as the moment where things are getting better, where people are looking at, what is more important than, being in touch with your friends and family and engaging with one another. And I think one of these things that we're walking away from is diversity. And so I just wanted to give a call out to all of those organizations that are making that a priority, seeing that that time is up, and that we need to be more focused on bringing more people that represent the fans and audiences that we are here to entertain and serve.
Amir, I'll stay there. I've got a good question. Not that you're going far, but just stay on mic, as it were. I've got a good question for you from Paul, who says, "What's the biggest mistake your data shows sponsors are making? How can they avoid it?"
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. So it really depends on each platform. It really depends on it's like and back to that Intel TrueView video with Liverpool, right? 19 seconds long. So the industry average, we looked at a bunch of teams like across 80 videos. 29% focus on watch time of 10 seconds, and then see ya 5 seconds due to full complete, right? And so looking at like how do we get around 17 seconds, that's the average viewing time for these videos and some of these platforms. But it's different, right? You got Netflix, they got long form content, but it's just understanding the fans and creating content that they're actually going to use. Spotify is a separate industry, changing their music so that it's streamed and played more. They're getting shorter. It's the TikTok effect, it's the Twitter effect. Each platform, it's got to be a little bit different, but I think it's that, that focus on, in venue, that focus on in person. I think right now we have to just double down on digital and then not just slap our logo on something, actually understand why you are adding value to that moment as a partner, right? Partnerships are both people adding value together. And so you have to add some value in as the brand partner, and then the organization has to specialize in how to serve you to their audiences. The relationships that fans have is stronger than the relationship that some people have, right? It's like, Kate was saying 6 feet back in Liverpool. I mean, I bet you all their fans are like, no problem, we'll do 12 feet, right? And that connection with fandom is so critical and so important. And so it's understanding how to best serve them at the end of the day. And I think the biggest mistake is people just think it's a one-size-fits-all model, and that's just not how it is.
Hey, here's a challenging question for you. I mean, if you've learned one lesson from what you've had to go through the last 9 months or so, what do you think that lesson would be?
Other than it's tough to tell people to social distance for a parade.
In terms of your work.
Yeah, I think a lesson, it's what everyone's been saying, it's adaptability. We've seen our manager, Jurgen Klopp, lead through that really flawlessly with our team and our player ops to make sure that we could play behind closed doors, and then thinking about how that translates onto the business side. I don't know, for those of you who are not familiar, we've got an amazing anthem, and You'll Never Walk Alone. And I think that that's been really topical right now. And the meaning behind it is that even in the darkest moments and tough times, you're not alone. So messaging that out to our fans, messaging it out to our partners, and certainly our global community as we get through this has been really important. And just like Amir's hat says, making sure that we can adapt on the fly.
And in terms of new opportunities, Kate, that is brought in that maybe you would never have imagined back in January or February, I mean, I'm sure there are some of those you can maybe talk about as well.
Yeah, so one of the things our digital team, which is led by a guy, Drew Crisp, who is fabulous, is we've really had to think about reinventing the digital match day experience, both because we had partner deliverables in it, but we also had fans who maybe were planning to come as season ticket holders to Anfield, or were making a pilgrimage for their first time to Anfield, and unfortunately are not able to do that as that sits now. So thinking about how we make the digital ecosystem of a match day experience valuable for people that can't come and actually sit at Anfield, which, if you haven't been, is an amazing experience.
Jackie, in terms of next year, obviously you've lost a lot this year. What happens if those events don't take place next year? I mean, obviously, at the moment you're just shifting everything forward a year, but what starts to happen in terms of the way you have to adapt and change if those events actually don't end up taking place? How do you manage to hit the key markets you're still trying to hit?
We go again. So, we are looking that we have a number of important partnerships. We have every confidence in the work of the IOC and the Tokyo committee is phenomenal for making sure that Tokyo is going to be ready in those time frames with the safety measures in place. But who knows? We need to see. So we need to ensure that as we're doing our business plans, that we have a plan B. That we, as I said, we've used our athletes successfully this year in making sure that we, reach our audience, maintain the message around the Olympics and the Paralympics, but also, broader society context. We will continue down that route, and then also focus on the things that are going to happen later in the year or the year after. I mentioned before, we've got the Euros, which are coming up in 2022, which we need to focus on. We also sponsor the Women's Champions League, and we've been very busy with that this summer. I mean, I do kind of one day we would have had the Women's Champions League in Spain and the Olympics around the same time, how we would have coped. But we've got a relevant conversation there with a number of really exciting partnerships, and we'll continue working with those groups.
How Jackie, staying with you, I mean, how's the Olympic buzz being maintained, or what do you think that the level of Olympic engagement is compared to obviously nothing like it would have been if the Olympics had taken place? But how difficult is it to keep that engagement going when you do have that extra year's wait?
It's actually probably been a little bit easier because the audience normally really engage, unless you're kind of a super athletics fan. The audience normally engages with the Olympics just a couple of months beforehand. We as organisations engage with the event far earlier. This experience has given us a time to get our athletes to talk about kind of what life is like as an athlete. We've got in Spain, we've got a relationship with Sal Cravioto, who's a kayaker, and incredibly inspiring. But if he's stuck in his flat in Asturias, he's going nowhere near a lake to practice kayaking. So he's having to have those same conversations with himself that we're all having, which is, how do I keep fit? How do I stop myself from getting bored? So we've managed to use those individuals. So again, a couple of people said earlier about the power of the athlete and the personality. We've used them to have probably a longer, more relevant conversation to the consumer earlier in the season than we probably would have if we'd been kind of focused on actual games time.
So, Tom, looking optimistically there, maybe this year's delay in the engagement you're getting through the athletes is actually going to help you come next year, because perhaps you already have that high level of engagement than you would have had in the months building up to a major event.
Yeah, I think it will. It strengthens our relationships with those athletes. Those athletes' relationships become longer term. As Jackie said, people don't tend to get excited about the Olympics until 3 months before, and that's probably a bit generous. It probably is closer to sort of 1 or 2 months before. But I think what this does is set a platform for what a brilliant Games Tokyo will be. I've no doubt in the kind of the Japanese organising committee in what a brilliant games they will be able to put on, seeing what they did with the Rugby World Cup. And then this has the added layer to it that it will likely be the first real, truly global event after what we've all just gone through. So it's a hugely exciting prospect for us as sponsors, but more so for the fans.
Kate, there's a question to you from Bentley, who says, Kate, you mentioned providing certainty for partners has been important. Have you seen that your partners' objectives have changed over the last few months, or have you focused on realigning the partnership to match their initial objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one for more of our head of delivery to speak to, but yes, it goes back to being cognizant of the shifting marketplace due to the global pandemic. And we are thinking a lot about how we work with partners shifting objectives right now. And then just more simply, some of the events and global initiatives that we had planned for brands, we weren't able to do. So how do you retoggle that and make sure that it works for partners in this new normal?
And let's bring you in on that, Amir. In terms of the clients you're working with, are you seeing a big realigning of their objectives?
Yeah, it's the I guess the mind frame is, so what now what, right? Like, this is the situation that we have ahead of us. How are we gonna move forward? So we're seeing more brands focus and understand more about where they're spending, and historically, just might have said a couple teams by saying this, but it's like the kids are grading their own quizzes, right? So sometimes they're going to have to go and look and confirm it and review to make sure what they're doing on their side. So we're seeing a lot more activity on that side. On the team side, I mean, with the different properties that we work with, and this is, across multiple different leagues in sports and esports, I think they get it, right? It's the D2C focus, how to best connect, how to understand what data that we can present. Surveying is nice to get really pointed questions, but social data, everyone knows the fans that come into the stadiums per se, but what can we do to understand the fans that are not in the stadiums, and then how can we best serve that content, like Kate was mentioning there? And it's there's ways of just understanding those audiences and segmenting and looking at the impact. You look at NASCAR, right? And when that ban with the Confederate flag happened, they have an amazing, amazing audience analytics team there. And what they did was they were able to see the impact without any impact to viewership, right? They were able to see new people enter the conversation, engage in all different ways. And so you need to be looking at that in that retrospect. So like, the clients are more keen on understanding their social audiences, understanding how do they rank, what is the affinity, how, like, for example, Anheuser-Busch, right? 22,000 Bud Lights are sold a minute, right? They're not looking for the conversion of each cost. Maybe they are, but they want to monitor that affinity. Are they associated with esports? How does that look? And so it's just understanding it with a different lens. And I think everyone is now hyper focused and double clicking on digital. Terrible pun, but I had to go with it. But it's brands own it, right? I mean, they're the ones. You can't rest your head on just, hey, we've been the greatest team for for all these years. And I'm not talking about, like, Liverpool is amazing at digital, amazing. So that wasn't towards Kate, but like, there's a lot of organizations that rested on, we've been champions for years, we're, all this, but now brands are like, show me. I need to see this because I need to compare this to all the other investments. And they're feeling that squeeze. And that happened during the pause of live sports. So this adaptation, I think, is the best for everyone. How we got here was terrible, right? Hopefully never anything like this again. But I'm sure Kate has something to add to this, of course.
Well, let's bring Kate in.
Yeah, so Amir is spot on, and I think marketeers right now are as savvy as they get, so there's no skirting objectives and what they need from a digital perspective. And I know from a sales perspective, we were tasked quite a bit at the start of lockdown on how our content was performing, and fortunate to have a really sophisticated media team who was able to help us step through what had shifted because of the pandemic. So, for example, we saw the episodic and archived content was performing really well during the first 3 months of lockdown. So we were then able to shift with our current partners to push content out in that manner and also repackage new opportunities for brands. So I just think brands are demanding it. There's no getting around it now. And on the property side, you have to be able to adjust to that.
Tom, let's bring you in as well in terms of how you can get value away from just the media.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. In the absence of live sport, and it's probably the way that sponsorship should be, or it is the way that sponsorship should be done anyway. I think it's forced brands to look at how they can generate value from a sponsorship beyond inherent media value and beyond exposure. So the way that whenever we take on a partnership, what we'll do is look at ways in which we feel that can drive value across our business. And that is anything as diverse as recruitment, through to training, through to how does it impact on our retail network? How do we use it for B2B hospitality to drive value? So when we started out for the Olympics and Paralympics, certainly in the UK, we mapped out, I think, 8 or 9 different ways that we felt that could add value to our business, which means that in order to generate that value, we're not as reliant on the inherent exposure. Just so happens, obviously, with Olympics and Paralympics, there is no real field of play. It's a clean field of play at the Olympic Games, so we don't have that inherent exposure. So we're always looking at ways that we can create value.
Thank you. We've only got a few minutes left, so it's time to get into summing up mode. I think really. I mean, let's try and be positive as well, though, Jackie. I mean, am I right to be positive? You know, obviously, many of us have gone through difficult times, but is it fair to leave this with actually as a fairly positive mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think consumers now are looking more and more as to what's behind a brand, what's behind a sponsorship, and we need to do that too. It's, you know, there's still a lot of really positive stories that we can talk about, and I think we've highlighted some of them today. We just need to think about sponsorship differently.
Thank you. Amir.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to look negatively. That's just not in my DNA, right? And every moment is an opportunity to just improve. And I think sometimes, so we have a quote here: "Comfort is the enemy of greatness." And sometimes we have to go through something uncomfortable to uncover that greatness. You look at all these amazing Olympic athletes that both Visa and Toyota are supporting, and kudos to you guys for supporting them all into next year, right? And so, like, they're working for hours just to get a millimeter of a second, even faster. And so that's the mind state. It's not about, failure is just a point to get to is part of the progress and getting to that next level. So, some organizations are not at that point of, having that digital intelligence of and having that tech stack and understanding how to best serve their fans and having all the data in that. Just take simple elements from whatever we spoke about today and start imploring and focusing on that digital connection that you have.
And Kate, I mean, you should be reveling in the glory of everything that's been achieved so recently. But of course, you're already off for the next campaign. You've had no chance to rest on your laurels. But looking ahead, how do you see things? I mean, obviously, hopefully, another Liverpool title. But beyond that, how do you see things for Liverpool?
Yes, absolutely, James. I mean, our goal is to win trophies. And as we look ahead, similar to Amir, I am glass half full by nature, but really excited. I think if you take COVID and all of the devastation aside, there will be some really exciting trends coming out of it. And I think that those are certainly on the digital front, thinking about how that continues to expand, but on the purpose-led marketing, which Toyota and Visa are doing great jobs of, as are many of our current partners. Now more than ever, I think that being able to define the why in sports partnerships is really important, and that's a really beautiful thing in what we're doing.
Thank you, which leaves you, Tom, then to have the last word, so make it count.
I think, well, the one thing for us that has come out of this is that we are truly all in this together. So our partnerships with our rights holders, we call them in the UK, but the sports properties will outlast COVID. But what has shown is that the best work that we can do is in really close collaboration with them. And I think this has shown the best ways to work together. And I'd include other stakeholders, like companies like Amir's in that. I think if we all pull together, then we can probably achieve things which are better than if we try and set out and do them on our own.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much to all 4 panelists. That's been fascinating. I knew it would be. I've loved sitting here and listening to you. I'm sure everybody else watching has enjoyed it too. Thank you to those who've submitted questions. Sorry for those who I haven't managed to read out the questions from, but thank you for everybody for putting them together. Just remains for me to say enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you to SportsPro and see you all hopefully face to face fairly soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.